Weekly newsletter.
Welcome to Magnificat TV News, dedicated to offering news of the Church. Today is Wednesday, August 29th, 2018. The Pope has traveled to Ireland for the World Meeting of Families. He has once again reiterated his apology for the abuses committed by priests. The former nuncio to the United States, Archbishop Vigano, has published a letter in which he accuses the Pope of covering up pedophile bishops and calls for his resignation. In the Congress on the Family, which preceded the meeting held in Dublin, Jesuit James Martin accused the Church of not welcoming homosexuals. Several U.S. states will investigate the Church to see if there was protection of pedophile priests in recent years. The Holy Father has visited Ireland to preside over the World Meeting of Families. He has taken the opportunity during the visit to again apologize for the behavior of pedophile priests.
During his speeches in the Irish capital, Dublin, the Pope acknowledged that the sexual abuse that occurred in the Catholic Church in Ireland is the cause of pain and shame in the Catholic community, and he denounced the failure of the ecclesiastical authorities to fight against these repugnant crimes.
The failure of the ecclesiastical authorities, bishops, priests, religious superiors, and others, to deal appropriately with these repugnant crimes has raised just indignation and remains a source of pain and shame for the Catholic community. I share those sentiments, said the pontiff.
During one of the events during the visit, which took place at Marian's Shrine of Knock, he referred to his topic, once again asking for forgiveness, and he asked the Virgin to protect the victims of those criminal priests who have been marked forever.
The Pope met for an hour and a half with a group of victims to listen to their stories and ask for their forgiveness on behalf of the Church.
The former papal nuncio to the United States, a man of great prestige in the Church for having denounced the economic corruption that existed in the Vatican, Archbishop Vigano, has accused the Pope of covering up pedophile bishops and has asked him to resign.
Archbishop Vigano's letter, which has been published simultaneously in Italian, English, and Spanish, coinciding with the conclusion of the Pope's visit to Ireland, compiles several of his conversations with Pope Francis, in which the pontiff expressly asked him about Cardinal McCarrick, one of the greatest sexual predators in history.
The Pope asked me in a deceitful way, "What is Cardinal McCarrick like?" I answered him with complete frankness and, if you will, with great naivete. "Holy Father, I don't know if you know Cardinal McCarrick, but if you ask the Congregation for Bishops, there is a dossier this thick about him. He corrupted generations of seminarians and priests, and Pope Benedict ordered him to withdraw to a life of prayer and penance," says the letter published by Archbishop Vigano.
The Pope did not make the slightest comment about those very grave words of mine, and did not show any expression of surprise on his face, as if he had already known the matter for some time, and he immediately changed the subject. But then, what was the Pope's purpose in asking me that question? What is Cardinal McCarrick like? He clearly wanted to find out if I was an ally of McCarrick or not, adds the document.
Not happy with the trap he had set for me on June 23, 2013, when he asked me about McCarrick, only a few months later, in the audience he granted me on October 10, 2013, Pope Francis set a second one for me, this time concerning a second of his protégés, Cardinal Donald Wuerl. He asked me, "What is Cardinal Wuerl like? Is he good or bad?" I replied, "Holy Father, I will not tell you if he is good or bad, but I will tell you two facts," Vigano continues.
And I told the two facts that I mentioned above, which concern Wuerl's pastoral carelessness regarding the aberrant deviations at Georgetown University, and the invitation by the Archdiocese of Washington to young aspirants to the priesthood to a meeting with McCarrick. Once again, the Pope did not show any reaction.
The Archbishop adds, Pope Francis has repeatedly asked for total transparency in the Church and for bishops and faithful to act with parrhesia. The faithful throughout the world also demand this of him in an exemplary manner. He must honestly state when he first learned about the crimes committed by McCarrick, who abused his authority with seminarians and priests.
In any case, the Pope learned about it from me on June 23, 2013, and continued to cover for him. He did not take into account the sanctions that Pope Benedict had imposed on him, and made him his trusted counselor along with María.
Archbishop Vigano maintains that Pope Benedict XVI had imposed sanctions on McCarrick after receiving a report from Richard Sipe regarding his improper sexual conduct with seminarians.
Finally, I learned with certainty, through Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re, then prefect of the Congregation for Bishops, that Richard Sipe's courageous and meritorious statement had had the desired result. Pope Benedict had imposed on Cardinal McCarrick sanctions similar to those now imposed on him by Pope Francis. The cardinal was to leave the seminary where he was living. He was forbidden to celebrate Mass in public, to participate in public meetings, to give lectures, to travel, with the obligation of dedicating himself to a life of prayer and penance.
Archbishop Vigano's letter also reveals that the cover-up of the ex-cardinal of United States precedes the arrival of Francis to the papacy. The list of names he cites is extensive. Bertone, Sodano, Levada, Ouellet, Baldisseri, Farrell, Ilson of Jesus Montanari, Sandri, Filoni, Becciui, Laholo, and Mamberti are only some of the names of which Vigano provides concrete data that substantiate their knowledge of Cardinal McCarrick's criminal behavior.
In fact, regarding Cardinal Bertone, Secretary of State with Benedict XVI, he says,
Nuncio Sambi's report, with all the attachments, was sent to Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone as Secretary of State. My two above-mentioned memos of December 6, 2006 and May 25, 2008 were also presumably handed over to him by the substitute. As already mentioned, the cardinal had no difficulty in insistently presenting for the episcopate candidates known to be active homosexuals. I cite only the well-known case of Vincenzo de Moro, who was appointed Archbishop of Vigevano and later removed because he was undermining his seminarians, and in filtering and manipulating the information he conveyed to Pope Benedict.
And regarding the current Secretary of State, Cardinal Parolin, he says the following.
Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the current Secretary of State, was also complicit in covering up the misdeeds of McCarrick, who had, after the election of Pope Francis, boasted openly of his travels and missions to various continents. In April 2014, the Washington Times had a front-page report on McCarrick's trip to the Central African Republic, and on behalf of the State Department, no less. As nuncio to Washington, I wrote to Cardinal Parolin asking him if the sanctions imposed on McCarrick by Pope Benedict were still valid. Needless to say, my letter never received any reply.
Regarding to the motives that have led the Archbishop to publish his testimony,
to restore the beauty of holiness to the face of the Bride of Christ, which is terribly disfigured by so many abominable crimes, and if we truly want to free the Church from the fetid swamp into which she has fallen, we must have the courage to tear down the culture of secrecy and publicly confess the truths we have kept hidden. We must tear down the conspiracy of silence with which bishops and priests have protected themselves at the expense of their faithful, a conspiracy of silence that in the eyes of the world risks making the Church look like a sect, a conspiracy of silence not so dissimilar from the one that prevails in the Mafia.
I want to recall this indefectible truth of the Church's holiness to the many people who have been so deeply scandalized by the abominable and sacrilegious behavior of the former Archbishop of Washington, Theodore McCarrick, by the grave, disconcerting, and sinful conduct of Pope Francis, and by the conspiracy of silence of so many pastors, and who are tempted to abandon the Church, disfigured by so many ignominies, he goes on to say,
"How much graver is it for the Church's supreme pastor, who, in the case of McCarrick, not only did not oppose evil, but associated himself in doing evil with the someone he knew to be deeply corrupt. He followed the advice of someone he knew well to be a pervert, thus multiplying exponentially with his supreme authority the evil done by McCarrick. And how many other evil pastors is Francis still continuing to prop up in their active destruction of the Church?"
Francis is abdicating the mandate which Christ gave to Peter to confirm the brethren. Indeed, by his action he has divided them, led them into error, and encouraged the wolves to continue to tear apart the sheep of Christ's flock. In this extremely dramatic moment for the universal Church, he must acknowledge his mistakes, and, in keeping with the proclaimed principle of zero tolerance, Pope Francis must be the first to set a good example for cardinals and bishops who covered up McCarrick's abuses, and resign along with all of them, he concludes.
Prior to the World Meeting of Families, the World Congress on the Family was held in Dublin. Although there were many very good participants, the speech of Jesuit James Martin eclipsed them all.
The Jesuit priest James Martin, most visible media leader of the gay lobby in the Catholic Church, achieved a public success in the World Meeting of Families held in Dublin. The Jesuit accused the Church of treating homosexuals like lepers.
Addressing a full auditorium, he stated that the majority of LGBT Catholics have been deeply wounded by the Church. They may have been mocked, insulted, excluded, condemned, or singled out for critique, either privately or from the pulpit, he said. They may never have heard the term gay or lesbian expressed in any positive way or even a neutral way.
One of his recommendations for parishes and Catholic communities was not to reduce gays and lesbians to the call to chastity. LGBT people are more than their sexual lives, but sometimes that's all they hear about, he said.
For Martin, the overemphasis on the sexuality of LGBT Catholics resulted in many of them feeling that they have to be dishonest about who they are and that they have no place in ministries. Like everyone else in the parish, said Martin, LGBT people should be invited into parish ministries as Eucharistic ministers, music ministers, lectors. At no time did he mention that for certain ministries, chastity must be required of them.
Following the publication of the data from the investigation in the state of Pennsylvania, according to which 300 priests abused over 1,000 children with the endorsement of their superiors, other U.S. states will begin a similar investigation.
So far, Missouri, Illinois, and New York are the states where prosecutors have announced their readiness to thoroughly investigate the possible abuses of the Catholic clergy in recent decades, as well as the crimes for covering up those abuses.
The Attorney General of Missouri, Josh Hawley, announced that he would launch an investigation into allegations of cover-up of sexual abuse in the Catholic Church, beginning with the Archdiocese of St. Louis. Its current Archbishop, Robert Carlson, testified under oath on May 23, 2014, that he could not remember when he was aware that abusing a minor is not only something immoral, but also a crime.
On the other hand, the District Attorney of the County of Albany has proposed to investigate the Catholic diocese in the state of New York to find out if they have covered up abuse by priests.
The Attorney General of Illinois, Lisa Madigan, has stated that the Catholic Church has a moral obligation to provide its parishioners and the public a complete and accurate accounting of all sexually inappropriate behavior involving priests, and has announced an investigation into the 6 dioceses of the state.
Our editorial this week is dedicated to commenting on the situation in the church after the latest scandal involving bishops and cardinals.
Estamos en Dublín terminando ya hoy viernes el Congreso de la Jornada Mundial de la Familia, que precede siempre a lo que es propiamente la jornada con la llegada del Santo Padre sábado y domingo. Ha sido un congreso realmente diferente a los demás. Diferente también por los acontecimientos que se han desarrollado antes del Congreso, incluso durante el mismo. Y si tuviera que elegir un nombre, diría que ha sido el Congreso de la Diversidad. Y de la diversidad porque la Iglesia ha querido mostrar la diversidad de vocaciones o de situaciones personales, familiares, que afectan a gente muy distinta y que todos son acogidos en la Iglesia. Sin duda que la jornada o la conferencia más importante, en el sentido al menos de numerosa en cuanto al público, fue la de James Martin, el sacerdote jesuita, que habló sobre la recepción en las parroquias de las personas LGBT, es decir, homosexuales, etc. Una conferencia rodeada de mucha expectación, con muchísima gente, que de hecho tuvieron que impedir el paso a todo el mundo que quería venir. Muchos de ellos naturalmente vinieron al margen del Congreso para escucharle porque estaban de acuerdo con él o porque simplemente querían saber qué es lo que él iba a decir. Fue una conferencia de crítica y de crítica dura a la Iglesia, porque acusó, este prestigioso sacerdote jesuita acusó a la Iglesia de no haber sido suficientemente madre para acoger a los homosexuales, de haberse fijado sobre todo en el sexo en lugar de en otras cualidades que tienen. Dejó en el aire, porque no lo aclaró, si esa acogida tenía que llevar consigo la aceptación de la comunión, aunque se dijo, por ejemplo, que tenían que ser admitidos como ministros de la Eucaristía, lo cual se supone que ellos también pueden comulgar, si no sería realmente muy extraño, pero no dijo nunca si esa admisión como ministros de la Eucaristía implicaba que renunciaban al ejercicio de la sexualidad homosexual, es decir, que practicaban la castidad. En todo caso, la Iglesia quiere mostrarse dentro de esta revolución de la ternura que está poniendo en marcha el Papa Francisco, quiere mostrarse como una madre que quiere acoger a todos. Pero junto a esto hay otras cosas, repito, que han salpicado, que han sido noticia los días anteriores y que en estos mismos días del Congreso lo han sido y que se muestran controvertidas con esta situación. Sobre todo proceden en esta última semana de Estados Unidos. La explosión que supuso el informe de la fiscal general, o el fiscal general, perdón, del estado de Pensilvania sobre los 300 sacerdotes y los abusos a más de 1000 menores, todavía tiene muchísimas consecuencias, entre otras, por ejemplo, que el cardenal Boerl de Washington pues era uno de los obispos implicados como supuestos teóricos que habían protegido a esos sacerdotes pederastas, renunció a venir a este congreso. O el cardenal O'Malley de Boston, que no estaba implicado en eso, sin embargo, también renunció a venir, alegando que tenía un problema de homosexualidad en su propio seminario y que tenía que entrar a fondo en ese tema. Pero no solamente eso, se ha sabido, por ejemplo, de que la fiscal del estado de Illinois, donde está Chicago, ha decidido investigar a todas las diócesis de su estado, incluido Chicago, para ver qué es lo que está pasando allí, con lo cual después de Pensilvania viene ahora Chicago y posiblemente va a ocurrir con otros estados de Estados Unidos. Esto genera una situación en este momento difícil de prever en cuanto a sus consecuencias. No faltan las voces dentro de la Iglesia, por ejemplo el cardenal Napier de Sudáfrica, que dicen que el problema está en la admisión de homosexuales dentro del clero y que no todos los homosexuales dentro del clero son pederastas. Es evidente, nadie piensa eso y lo mismo que nadie piensa que todos los homosexuales dentro o fuera del clero sean pederastas, pero la mayor parte de los casos de pederastia están ligados a homosexuales dentro del clero. Y el cardenal Napier ha dicho que ese es donde está el problema y no es el único. que lo ha dicho. Así que nos encontramos en una encrucijada. Por un lado, la Iglesia hace un esfuerzo por acoger a los homosexuales y por otro lado se encuentra con que los homosexuales que ya están dentro, especialmente dentro del clero, una parte de ellos le está creando un gravísimo problema con el tema de la pederastia. Es una situación no fácil de manejar, hasta el punto de que, por ejemplo, el periódico Washington Post, que es el periódico de la ciudad de Washington, sobre todo, de la cual es arzobispo el cardenal Well, pues ha pedido que quiten al arzobispo cuanto antes, lo mismo que ya se hizo con McCarrick, e incluso ha llegado a decir que si no lo hace, el Papa tendría que presentar su dimisión. Repito, una situación compleja, difícil, que nos plantea algo que en este momento seguramente no tenemos todos los datos, puede haber también muchos intereses económicos en juego, pero que sí que crea una tensión enorme en la Iglesia. Se tiene que abrir la Iglesia no solo a los homosexuales que viven la castidad, que eso es evidente, siempre lo ha hecho, sino a los homosexuales que no viven la castidad, aceptándolos con todas sus consecuencias. Eso generaría el rechazo de muchos católicos porque va en contra de la enseñanza de la Iglesia. Y si se abre a los homosexuales que viven su homosexualidad y la practican, si lo hace, lo tiene que hacer también con el clero. Y si eso lo hace, generará pederastia. Son muchos interrogantes que en este momento están en el aire y que lo único que se me ocurre es pedir a todos oración. Oración sobre todo por el Santo Padre, que tiene que guiar la Iglesia en este momento tan difícil. Hasta la semana que viene, si Dios quiere.
If you wish to be up to date with what is happening in the Church, you can visit our news webpage, www.catolicosonline.org. Until next week, God willing.